Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel Let's Talk Boxing. I did tweet earlier to say that I was going to put out a video where I was analysing the undercard of the Beterbiev Yarde fight, getting quite technical and talking about some of the fighters on the undercard, fighters that you guys will be seeing on your screens a lot more frequently, and I was going to link it with this topic that I'm discussing in this video, but it would have dragged on far too long, so I'm going to do them as separate videos, even though putting out an undercard analysis can really mess up the algorithm because it's not very popular. Only the really hardcore fans tend to want to check those videos out, but nonetheless I will try and put it out tomorrow. I have already recorded it. For this particular video though, it will be the last video that I do on Anthony Yarde in a while, unless something extraordinary develops around him. But it's a topic that I think needs to be discussed. It's a topic that deals with the psychological phenomena that I think is revolving around Anthony Yarde right now. And following the brilliant performance he put in against Beterbiev is something that could actually come back and backfire against Anthony Yarde if he doesn't find the right psychological balance. So first, let me give you some background context. I put out a tweet a few days ago where I was asking, what is the reason that seemingly a lot of neutral fans wanted Anthony Yarde to lose against Beterbiev? I'm not talking about Beterbiev fans. They're not neutral, right? I'm not talking about fans of other fighters that are rivals of Anthony Yarde. They're also not neutral. We're talking strictly about those that don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. And 44.1% said that they were neutral and they wanted Anthony Yarde to win. That got the majority of votes as an individual choice. But that meant that 56%, the majority of neutrals, did not want Anthony Yarde to win the fight. 5.5% made their choice because of promoter affiliation. They just don't like Frank Warren. 18.6% felt that it was because Anthony Yarde's CV just isn't deep enough. And the majority of the votes, almost a third of everybody polled, said that it was because they didn't like Tunde Ajayi or Spencer Fearon. Now you might ask yourself, what does it have to do with Anthony Yarde, whether his promoter's liked by others or not? Even his trainer, that's not Anthony himself. What's the problem here? And as for his CV not being deep, well, that's his promoter's job to create the best possible path for him to the top, to get as many world titles as possible and make as much money as possible. So what's the deal here? Why is there a reason to dislike Anthony Yarde? Well, there is a phenomenon known as Schadenfreude, and it comes from two German words. Schaden, meaning damage or harm, and Freude, meaning joy. It is literally the malicious joy that somebody takes in observing the misfortunes of others. And this has been studied extensively by psychologists. Various scientific studies have been carried out observing this, but in one psychological study, they put subjects in an MRI scan and they were observing their brain patterns as they were showing them video clips of people that were experiencing misfortune. And the area of the brain that was lighting up like a Christmas tree was the area of the brain that dealt with joy and pleasure. So it was a very emotive response. People were experiencing real happiness from seeing other people fail. So what is the driving factor behind Schadenfreude? What is it that leads people to enjoy watching other people fail? Well, there are three predominant areas that this occurs. One of them is called aggression-based Schadenfreude, another one is rivalry-based Schadenfreude, and a third is justice-based Schadenfreude. Now we'll start off with aggression-based Schadenfreude. That often involves group identity. Now, because we're going to discuss this contentious topic, I'm going to be very careful in how I word it so I don't trigger any algorithms on YouTube and affect the channel. But I got a couple of messages from people. One of them shall remain nameless because he messaged me privately. The other one was Lewis from the Ringside Fracas boys. Shout out to Ringside Fracas. They both felt that the pigmentation in the skin of Anthony Yarde might be a motivating factor for why people want to see him lose. Now, there are certainly going to be people like that in society. However, I'm not sure it accounts for all of the numbers that I saw, especially when you consider that a lot of fighters with similar pigmentation that come from similar inner city backgrounds, guys like Dillian Whyte, Richard Riakporhe, Isaac Chamberlain, Zelfa Barrett, his uncle Pat is very popular, Craig Richards, AJ Buatsi, these sorts of guys are loved, or at least not yearned for them to lose. So there has to be a little bit more to it than just that. And Lewis suggested that maybe Tunde Ajayi is quite obnoxious and loud, and the British public just don't relate to that. And this is a viewpoint that is shared by quite a few people. James Becker feels that the hatred for Tunde is shocking and over the top, but he explains that he believes the average Brit is naturally introverted, and the one of us, so to speak, type of character is somebody who portrays himself as humble, and he gives Dave Allen as an example. Ra Hockham suggests that it seems to be that a British phenomenon that working class men are expected to never behave above their station. It doesn't seem to apply to men successful in more affluent endeavours. So the argument here is that perhaps Tunde Ajayi being a brash character is what rubs people up the wrong way. And if you look at a guy like Anthony Joshua, when he was face to face with Dominic Brazil, he actually said to him, don't talk and not back it up like the rest of you Americans. So there is a divergence in how athletes are expected to act, or how they act in order to be relatable to a particular audience. In the United Kingdom, it is the more humble sort of character that tends to be more popular, whether it's Anthony Joshua, Ricky Hatton, Dave Allen, Frank Bruno. These sorts of guys were really loved. Whereas Tyson Fury, although he's become a lot more loved of late, that has coincided with him becoming more politically correct, with him talking about mental health. In the past, when he was a lot more controversial and a lot more brash, he was more of a pariah. Whereas in the United States, the more brash he is, the more popular he seems to be. And you look at guys like Floyd Mayweather, like Adrian Broner, they would not translate well to a British audience. They're too flashy, they're too brash. So perhaps there is just a divergence in culture. There is also another method of a group identity, though, and that has nothing to do with the tribalistic elements of community and ethnicity and things like that, but rather the fighter that you affiliate to. He becomes a team, so to speak, much like a football team that you support. And that will mean that you will enjoy seeing a rival team fall apart. Now, there's another motive, like we said, called rivalry-based Schadenfreude, and that's more individualistic. It's about interpersonal competition. In other words, X man versus Y man. And Clara sent a tweet to say, if it's the irrationality of the anti-Yarde clique that you're seeking to explain, perhaps the cause is irrational as well. Envy may lie at the root. After all, what sane man would complain if he woke up one morning with Yarde's physique and charisma? The man's a freaking Adonis. And let me just say to all my subscribers out there, I totally get what Anthony Yarde's going through. Anybody that says these photos of me are photoshopped is nothing but a hater. They're 100% real, and it's very difficult for me on a daily basis having to bypass hordes of jealous men and fighting off millions and millions of female fans the world over. But that's for another topic, that's for another day. Let's get back to this topic now. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at athletes, people in show business that are popular with women, often they become disliked. Anthony Joshua is one example of this. Now, it doesn't mean if you dislike AJ, you dislike him because you're jealous of his physique. But there is an element out there that are like that. When David Lemieux first came to the fore, and a lot of women on my timeline were talking about, oh, who is this handsome guy? There were a lot of male boxing fans who would pipe up and try to put him down. They'd get jealous, essentially. Anthony Yarde may be suffering from that sort of thing too. And you see this with boy bands and singers. You know, when Justin Bieber first came out and he was getting a lot of the teenage girls' attention, other teenage boys were angry. Same way that a lot of teenage boys put down boy bands. It is rivalry-based Schadenfreude. After this comes justice-based Schadenfreude. And this is the idea that another man is immoral or not likable, and as a result of that, they deserve to be punished. Or, even if they're not immoral, they simply do not deserve what they have. And as a result of that, when they lose what they do not deserve, an individual can take joy in it. And if they are punished, so to speak, by failure, then justice has been served. I want you to imagine a criminal who's hurt a lot of people, something bad happens to him, and you'll hear a lot of the public take joy in that. That is an example of justice-based Schadenfreude. Now, because Spencer Fearon and Tunde Ajayi have rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way over the years, and I'm not one of those guys. I like these dudes. I've done videos in the past where I've put out a defense of Tunde Ajayi. I don't have a problem, but many people do. So because of that and the association with Anthony Yarde, they almost feel as though it's retribution in some ways for these guys to fail, or the person that is associated with them to fail. There's also the idea that a lot of people mentioned that they do not believe Anthony Yarde deserves the shot at Beterbiev and the big time because his CV was too thin. He didn't earn it. There are guys out there trying to take the hard route. Whereas along comes Anthony Yarde, and for whatever reason, maybe he looks the part, maybe his fighting style's fun, whatever the case might be, they're pushing him. And they do not see that as fair. So if he loses to Beterbiev, justice will be done. Now, when it comes to the aggression-based and rivalry-based, it's very unlikely that those groups of people would want to or be able to change their views on Anthony Yarde based merely on his performance against Artur Beterbiev. In other words, if you dislike Anthony Yarde because he's against your group, whether that group means Matchroom, whether it means a cultural thing, whether it means a pigmentation thing, whether it means your favorite fighter and who you affiliate to, that's not going to change. By the same token, a rivalry-based thing is highly unlikely to change. In other words, if you are envious of Anthony Yarde, you're not suddenly going to stop being envious. However, if your viewpoint is based around the idea of justice-based Schadenfreude, you're not necessarily keen on those around him, you don't think he's earned the shot, well, that can change based on his performance. And I've seen a significant shift on my timeline. The amount of people that suddenly have great respect for Anthony Yarde. He's proven himself, he's a warrior. Because of that, people want to see more of Anthony Yarde. Now that shift has occurred, he's gained approval. Now that can be a negative thing. You know, there's such a psychological position that you can put yourself in whereby you fester the idea of a siege mentality. And this can really drive a guy towards success. It doesn't apply to everybody because you have different personality traits in different people. Some people need their confidence boosted, they need an arm around the shoulder, they need love. But generally speaking, a siege mentality can really motivate an individual to overcome the odds. 442 is a football magazine. They wrote an article back in 2011, which was featuring Jose Mourinho, one of the most successful coaches in the history of the game. And they spoke about how to create a siege mentality. And they brought in a Bournemouth Football Club psychologist, Dan Abrahams, in order to discuss this. In other words, they want to fester this idea. The world is against us. It's you against the world. You can overcome. You can do this. Silence those people. I knew a fighter who shall remain nameless, who actually left social media because he was getting a lot of abuse on social media. He felt it was too toxic of a place and he left. If I was his trainer, I would have printed out all the abusive tweets and I would have stuck them on the wall in the gym. And every day that he was training for his next fight, he would have had to have trained among the images of those tweets, because I would have wanted him to get into that zone where he wants to shut up each and every one of those people. That is what a siege mentality can do if it's festered correctly. It can drive you. Anthony, look at the way they doubt us. They say that all we do is scream lions in the camp, that you're just an athlete. There's no technical element there to you. You're going to get washed. You're going to get battered every time you step up. Go out there and shut these fools up. The problem is when you get that validation and the crowd accept you and they tell you, yeah, you're great, you're brilliant. Well, now maybe you don't have that same drive to shut those people up anymore. Maybe the environment to fester a siege mentality fades. And there's a couple of comments that I've seen from Anthony Yarde, which I really didn't like in terms of the psychological position that he's in right now. And there are also a couple of comments that Artur Beterbiev made, which to me highlights who he is deep down. Forget the persona of wanting to appear humble and stuff like that. He's not humble, but there's a fire beneath that. There's a man there that thinks, I will not submit to anybody. I want to be superior. I want to be king. He has a how dare you challenge me mentality. Boxing King Media, who's continuing to put out some tremendous stuff, he put up the post-fight press conference whereby Artur Beterbiev is asked about the fight, and instead of being gracious in victory, he turns and he said, I was slow. I think he was slow. Talk about kicking a man while he's down, right? Later on, Boxing King Media also put out a tweet and he said, boxing is a brotherhood. They knock 10 bells out of each other. Respect was earned. And it shows a clip. Yarde goes to congratulate Beterbiev and he says to him, I learned a lot. And Beterbiev says to him, you did a great job. And Yarde's basically saying, you know, I gained experience. And Beterbiev, in the midst of being this nice guy, turns to him and says, yeah, for you it was experience, for me it was a win. In other words, he's encouraging him and telling him, yeah, you can get there one day. You can be a champ one day. This was experience for you. But for me, it was a win. You challenged me. Yeah, this was a learning thing for you. You were just another scalp to me. Don't fool yourselves. He said I was slow. I think he's slow. Yeah, for you, it was a experience. But for me, it was just a win. Now, Anthony Yarde is such a lovely dude, man. The way he went over, congratulated him, he thanked him. And then he goes and does these post-fight interviews. He's so humble in the way he's speaking. I always have to face these Russians with the big abs and the veins popping out their muscles. Yeah, like you don't have big abs and veins popping out your muscles, right? But he's acting in a humble way. But the same token, I know he's semi-joking and he's being humble, but why are you talking about these great superior Russian fighters? You can't think that way. You've had other great fighters that have been humble in the way they've conducted themselves and they overcame, right? People like Manny Pacquiao, Nonito Donaire. I'm not saying you have to act in a way that is aggressive in order to have that fire within you. I'm not saying that. But if he's now getting the praise and the validation and he's in his mind saying that I've had such a tough route, man. There are other champions that have easier routes. Why am I the one that has to try and overcome these monsters all the time? Is he having the right mindset in order to push a siege mentality? Did Schadenfreude benefit Anthony Yarde? Them shouting lions in the camp when people were mugging them off, did that bring them together and make them want to overcome? And the fact that they've now had this reception, does that take away an edge potentially? Or maybe the fact that he's never won a world title is motivation enough and he doesn't need people to be putting him down, and the love that he's going to experience potentially from the public will push him onto a new level. He will stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, about Anthony Yarde moving forward. What type of mentality does he need to create in order to get to the top? Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.